Okay, what's up? Today we are going to be talking about TV shows with the worst ending. These are shows that I have personally watched, so if you're sitting here thinking, what about Dexter? I never finished Dexter. Sorry. Yeah, feel free to leave the shows that you would put on this list and why in the comments. I am interested to hear about that. This is going to be in no particular order. Also, for those who are subbed for book content, I'm not completely abandoning the book content. I'm just trying to merge TV, movies, and book, basically just be like a media channel. So I will have a book video out next week, have no fear. This is not a video where I'm going to be going over every single detail and contrivance and plot hole. This is just like me coming up with the things that pissed me off personally the most and ranting about that. So we're going to start out with like 2 or 3 shows that I don't have all that much to say about, and then we're going to get into the shows that we might be here a while, because I do have a lot to say on it. First up, Gossip Girl. If you don't know what Gossip Girl is, it is a show about wealthy Upper East Siders in New York City. It takes place in like the late 2000s, early 2010s, and there is an anonymous blog called Gossip Girl that basically just keeps tabs, spills the secrets on all of these wealthy Upper East Siders, creates drama. We love drama. So I definitely don't hate the last few seasons of Gossip Girl as much as everyone else. It's a downgrade for sure from the first few seasons. I still think it's watchable. I still watch those seasons when I do rewatch the show, unlike the Vampire Diaries, which I give up on as soon as the heretics appear. Spoiler alerts, that may or may not be another show coming up in this video. So my biggest issue with Gossip Girl is, unsurprisingly, the fact that they made Dan be the big reveal of who Gossip Girl is. Not only does it not make any sense, but it totally recontextualizes the entire show. It makes Dan go from like an annoying, slightly self-absorbed guy to a complete stalker who lied and conned his way into marrying the girl he spent years harassing and stalking and ruining the life of. At the very least, they do retcon it so that Jenny was aware that Dan was Gossip Girl and consented to everything that was posted about her, because if they didn't retcon it that way, he would have been like the worst person ever for ruining his sister's literal life. But yeah, like none of this makes any sense. There are so many clips and scenes of Dan like reacting to a Gossip Girl blast with like shock and confusion, and he's in a room by himself. It's not like he's acting for the benefit of someone else. He's fully alone, and he's just reacting like, what? Why would he be doing that if he's Gossip Girl? I know he's crazy, but is he like genuinely that crazy? Does he have split personalities where one of them is Gossip Girl and the other one is Dan, and they don't know what each other are doing? Like, what's the explanation for that? I believe in the original Gossip Girl book series, which I haven't read, I believe it was Dorota who was Gossip Girl, which I think makes a lot more sense than Dan. And I think the original plan for the show was that it was supposed to be Eric, who is Serena's younger brother, and that definitely makes a lot more sense for the show, and I think they should have kept it being Eric. The issue is mysteries should be solvable. If you're paying attention, there should be enough clues that you can solve it. And I'll leave what I'm saying at that, because I will like get back into that for the next show on my list. The next show, similarly to Gossip Girl, is Pretty Little Liars, which is also about a group of teenagers being stalked by an anonymous internet persona. If you've never watched it, it basically starts with this friend group of Aria, Emily, Spencer, and Hannah, and their kind of leader, Allie. And one night while they're having a sleepover, Allie goes missing, and then years later they all start getting creepy and incriminating texts from an anonymous number who just signs off as A. I was boots on the ground when it came to PLL. From the very first season, I was watching it weekly on cable. I would FaceTime my friends as the episodes were airing, and we'd all watch together and like live react with one another. We'd send each other texts pretending to be A. I was on Tumblr looking up theories. Like, I was in the trenches with this show. I have also read most of the book series, so I will be doing a little bit of comparison with that. So the big issue with Pretty Little Liars is that it is super convoluted. It starts out with, oh, there's this person pretending to be Allison and signing off as A, to, oh, there's a whole team of A's, to there's Redcoat, but then there's also A, to, well, this person was A, but then this person became A, but then after that, this person became A. Like, it gets to a point where it's no longer a fun, solvable mystery, and instead it's just the writers desperately trying to shock viewers and give a plot twist that no one could have possibly seen coming. The first few A reveals were incredibly interesting. Like, I was fine with it being multiple people. Mona being A, great. Toby being A, awesome. Melissa being A, crazy. Allison, the Allison being Redcoat, amazing. Ezra kind of being A, but kind of not, fantastic. But Ezra, in my opinion, is the start of the end in terms of, like, that's where it starts to get really, really convoluted. And that also, if I get some details wrong, it's because the show is so fucking convoluted and I haven't rewatched it ever. I haven't watched it since it first came out. Arya ending up with Ezra in the end, crazy. Crazy the way the show actually groomed us into being like, yeah, this is totally normal and fine. Crazy. In the books, that doesn't happen. Ezra goes to jail, as he should, because he's a fucking dating a student. Anyways, so the end reveal is that the big bad A, the leader of all leaders, is a girl named Cece, and it's revealed that Cece was actually Allison's cousin Charles, who was born a boy but then transitioned into being a girl, and that in and of itself is so... like, trans people should never be used as a plot twist, especially not when that trans person is like a terrible psycho stalker murderer person. Like, let's not do that. And the CC reveal was when I first felt super disappointed with this show. It's when I was first kind of like, okay, I don't think this is going to be a show that viewers are going to really be able to guess. I'm not sure all the clues that have been dropped are really going anywhere. I don't know if the theories are going to get it right, because this kind of comes out of blue. Like, how are we supposed to know that this girl, who is, by the way, played by a cisgender woman, is actually like the trans cousin of her mother's twins? Like, what are we doing? But here's the thing. Cece isn't actually the big bad. No, plot twist. It's Spencer's evil British twin.
I'm just a girl who met a man when he came in from the rain.
Who nobody knew existed and we had never met before. It's so fucking lame and unsatisfying. I said I'd get back to talking about how mystery endings should be predictable, and here's where I do that. I'm going to read a little bit of a recent book review I wrote for The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley, because I feel like it just describes my feelings on mysteries super well. So, excuse me while I directly read. In my opinion, the mark of a good mystery is this: if you look hard enough, you can fit the pieces together, but if you just want an entertaining story to throw you for a loop, it can also be that, if you just don't pay attention hard enough. That is to say, the clues should be there, but it shouldn't be so blatantly obvious that you can't ignore. Any author can randomly give you a bunch of context that you had no way of knowing, just for shock value. Chekhov's gun is a standard trope and widely taught rule for writing fiction for a reason. It's not subversive and groundbreaking to pretend you have a Chekhov's gun if it's actually irrelevant. It's just bad writing. Agatha Christie would never. And that last bit also leads me into the fact that this show constantly brought up things that you would think would be relevant clues and should have been relevant clues, but were actually just completely disregarded. Again, for the sheer purpose of just making it so that nobody could ever possibly guess the ending. It is a betrayal to your viewers who spend hours scouring your show for clues and creating their own analysis and theories, who follow you on Twitter and keep up with your updates just for plot points and details to be completely dropped. With pretty much all of the shows talked about in this video, I do still go back and rewatch them regardless of the terrible ending, but I've never once rewatched Pretty Little Liars, which is crazy considering how important it was to me when I was a kid and a young teen. I tried once, and then I thought, what's the point? Because in a mystery show, if the reveal of the mystery sucks, then the entire show becomes pointless. In the books, spoiler for the books, the reveal in the books is kind of convoluted too, so I'm going to try and explain this. Basically, if I'm remembering correctly, Allison is A, because Allison is not the girl who went missing. So Allison had a twin sister named Courtney, and Courtney was kind of crazy. And so then Allie and Courtney's parents were like, okay, we're going to send Courtney to the asylum. We're sending her to an insane asylum. So at the time, Courtney switches places with Allie and pretends to be Allie and pretends that Allie is Courtney. So then Allie is actually the one that's sent away to the insane asylum, and Courtney is actually the one that's friends with all these girls and pretending that she is Allison. So basically, there was an Allison who did get like hit over the head and buried, but Allison, the real Allison, was A, because Courtney was Allison. Does that make sense? And I think that is a way better plot twist than what we got in the show. Is it like the greatest, most creative plot twist ever? No. I think the twin plot twist is a pretty common trope, but it's a lot better than the weird trans cousin, evil British twin, all that bullshit that we got from the show. Okay, then we have The Vampire Diaries. This is the last one that I feel like I don't actually have that much to say on. I think The Vampire Diaries is the quintessential example for how shows fall into the trap of feeling the need to raise the stakes every single season to the point where you literally can't go any further. There's no stakes higher than what we've gotten, and yet the show is still popular, and so these networks are still saying like, no, we want another season. We keep writing. We want another season. In season 1, the big bad is Damon, Elena's boyfriend's brother. He's just like not a great guy. He fucks everything up, but he's really not that big of a threat. He's just honestly more of a nuisance than anything. In season 2, they introduced the originals, specifically Klaus. Klaus is the oldest, most hard to beat, most deadly vampire in history, and he's a great villain. I think they keep the originals as being the villains for like both season 2 and 3. But how do you go up from there? How do you raise the stakes past like the oldest, most deadly vampire alive? And so because of that, by the time you get to season 8, the big bad of the show is quite literally Lucifer. We went from some guy's brother being the villain to the fucking devil himself. Like, that's insane. As soon as the heretics get introduced, I think that's in like season 6, at the start of season 6, I'm just like, and closing the laptop. I'm done. I'm good. I got Kai, I got Klaus, I got everyone I give a fuck about. I'm done. So yeah, I don't really have anything more to say on the show, so we'll just kind of quickly move on from there. The Umbrella Academy. The Umbrella Academy is kind of hard to explain. How do I explain this? It's basically about a bunch of babies who were immaculately conceived, but not only that, like it's like one day they just were super pregnant. Like they just woke up and all of a sudden were like 9 months pregnant and giving birth. And so then this super rich billionaire adopts all of these babies and turns them into superheroes because all these babies are like, they have superpowers. But then one of the kids they sort of just lock away because it's like, oh, she doesn't have powers. Obviously she has powers, and they're the most dangerous powers of all the kids. So that's kind of your intro to the show. I remember finishing season 4, the last season, and going, wow, that was a lot worse than season 1 and 2, but you know, at least it was entertaining. Only to go online and see people calling it like the worst season of television they'd ever seen, saying it was unwatchable, they couldn't even finish it, it completely ruined the show, they'd never be able to look at it the same. So people had very strong reactions to this season, and I agree, it was really bad. I just wasn't, like, I finished it and was like, okay, that sucked. What happened in season 1 and 2? Season 1 and 2 are like some of the greatest seasons of television ever. But personally, maybe this is a hot take. I know this is a hot take. I actually liked season 4 more than season 3. Do I think, like, objectively on paper, season 4 is a better season than season 3? No. But I thought it was more entertaining, and it was more manageable because it was shorter. And something you'll come to learn about me is that I am pretty forgiving for a bad season of TV as long as you keep me entertained. But that kind of brings me to the big problem I had, and this is an issue I found many Netflix shows to have, including one we will get into next on this list. I'm sure you can guess what it is. Throughout the seasons, stakes have been raised so much that the characters and their arcs end up being entirely abandoned in order to focus on the plot. A show should be well balanced. We want high stakes and action and powers, but we also want to stay grounded with our beloved characters and their personal journeys they go through. If we don't do that, then what is the point of all of this other than just to be a distracting spectacle? I'm a writer, and I got my minor in creative writing in college, and something that is drilled into us is the idea that the plot has to affect the characters, and plot points have to have a reason. They cannot just be there because it's entertaining. I'll use fantasy as an example because that is the genre that I saw people fucking up the most during my time in creative writing courses. Let's say you want to add dragons to your story, okay? Why dragons? What is the inclusion of dragons saying about the commentary you're making? What does it mean within the world you're building? What is the point of specifically picking dragons? Why not unicorns? Why not phoenixes? Why not mermaids? Why dragons? And your answer can't be because dragons are cool. That is meaningless fodder. My point in saying all of that is that people fall in love with shows like The Umbrella Academy for the characters. The plot is there to push the story of the characters forward. The entire reason we care about the plot is because of what it means for the characters. The plot is not a separate component of fun and razzle dazzle. It has stakes because of the consequences the characters face. It has stakes because it is saying something about the characters and adding to their development and arcs. But by the end, shows like Umbrella Academy have raised their stakes so far and so beyond the original scope of the first few seasons that they have literally lost the plot. That super cool fight scene is no longer a story of the sacrifices that come with becoming disillusioned from the system you live under and trust, and how you are not only giving up everything you've ever believed, but you are now breaking away from all of those people that you love so much because they are still involved with that system. Now it's just, wow, cool action. That massive world-ending disaster is no longer a commentary on the consequences of isolating and degrading those that we see as lesser, of internal struggle turning into external blowouts. It is now just a big thing that happens to force the characters into action. That dance break is no longer about showing how these siblings feel so disconnected from one another, and yet they will always be family. They will always be connected and yearn to feel like one team again. Now it's just a mandatory dance break because, well, tradition, I guess. I feel like that sums up my personal issues with the ending of The Umbrella Academy. There's a whole bunch of plot holes and contrivances and inconsistencies, and I could go into a long discussion about how the romantic relationship between Five and Lila is not only unnecessary, but very uncomfortable and creepy, and didn't make any sense, but I will just leave it there. And that show segues nicely into our next show, the most recent addition to this list, Stranger Things. Ugh, that pains me to say. Stranger Things, I'm sure you know, but if you don't, it's set in 1983 in a small town in Indiana where a group of young friends, one of their friends goes missing, and it just kind of brings them into this world of crazy fantasy creatures, specifically like D&D creatures and all that kind of stuff. This section is going to be a little bit disorganized because I just had so many thoughts and I was just like, writing them down angrily. Let's start with Eleven's death. Regardless of if you believe she's dead or not, neither choice makes any sense. Like, if she is dead, then you have to wonder how she was able to use her powers despite the power to turn sound to get Mike into her mind. If she's alive, then that opens a whole can of worms of like, when did she and Callie have time to plan this? How is Callie still alive? How far away are they? And how are they able to use their powers from such a distance where the power deterring sound isn't affecting them, but they're still able to use their powers perfectly fine? And just like so many other things. And it honestly just felt like the Duffer Brothers knew that scene of Elle dying didn't really make any sense, so they were just like, we'll give them another option to believe in. Also, the lack of payoff with Hopper and Elle is crazy. The entire season, me and my brother were getting so annoyed with the whole like bickering father-daughter dynamic, but we were both kind of sitting there like, it's annoying in the moment, but it'll have a big and emotional payoff when one of them inevitably dies. But it didn't. Hopper didn't really seem upset at all about the fact that his daughter has died again. Like, this is the second child he's lost. This is the second child that he should, if the writing was good, feel like he couldn't save and protect, and he has pretty much no emotions over it. Like, he's literally just going to Mike being like, yeah, well, you know, shit or get off the pot. You kind of got to get over it. Like, what? Why the fuck did I have to sit through a season of them being so annoying and fighting all the time just for it to not even be this emotional payoff that I was expecting? Also, I think Hopper should have died instead of Elle based on how they were setting it up. Like, Hopper sacrifices himself, and then that way he kind of, in his eyes, makes up for the fact that he wasn't able to save his biological daughter and he had no power over her death, and so now he does take power over Elle's death and is able to save her. You know what I'm saying? Speaking of Elle, let's talk about Mike and Eleven. Their relationship was so badly written that I would say the majority of people thought they had broken up. in between season 4 and 5. Like, they were not being cozy with each other at all. They didn't kiss until the very final scene where she's dying. And I think my theory on that is that since Millie Bobby Brown has since gotten married, maybe she wanted to kind of limit the intimate romantic physical scenes that she had with Finn Wolfhard, especially because I know that has been like a long running real life ship, and people will make something out of nothing. But, and that's fine, that's totally understandable, but there's so many ways to still depict physical intimacy without like actually having them kiss. Like, you can use body doubles, you can use camera work, like there's just ways to do it. And they don't even have to be kissing. Like, the scene of Mike and Eleven on the roof of the radio station, she could have been laying her head on his shoulder. Like, there was just so much where it truly just felt like they had agreed to be friends. It was very odd. Also, in the end, Mike still doesn't say he loves Eleven. What the fuck? And I think that just adds to it, where like by the time Elle was dying, I was just kind of like, wait, they're still together? Really? Because it kind of didn't seem like Mike gave a fuck about Elle, but now you're like screaming and crying like your entire world is ending, but also you won't say you love her anymore. Like, what the fuck is happening with this relationship? Regardless of if you're a Byler or a Maleven, like, both parties should be and are incredibly dissatisfied with how Mike and Elle's relationship was dealt with this season. I think I might have to go charge my mic for a little. Now that we've talked about Maleven, I think y'all know what's coming next. Byler. The Duffer Brothers absolutely pulled off one of the most egregious cases of queerbaiting in television history. As I said in my last video, I really did not have a horse in this race one way or another. I saw what Byler fans were saying. I saw what Maleven fans were saying. I truly thought it could go either way, and I didn't really care what way it went. However, even if you are a Maleven, even if you never believed that Byler had even a chance, I still think you should be able to agree that the Duffer Brothers queerbaited, because they left the door open enough and gave enough little hints that they continued to get queer viewers to come back season after season, only to see Will get rejected in the very final episode. And if Byler was truly never meant to happen, if they never wanted people to even think that Byler was going to happen, they would have shut that shit down a long time ago. And I know diehard Malevins will say like, well, it was never even a chance, so there was nothing to shut down. And to that I say bullshit. Even if you believe in Maleven, even if you believe that Byler was never on the table, the fact that there is such a large base of viewers, specifically queer viewers, who were completely convinced that Byler was going to happen should be enough to tell you that it was clearly not that clear that Maleven was always endgame and there was no chance that Byler was ever going to happen. And there are countless interviews where the cast and the Duffer Brothers are being directly asked about Byler, and instead of just saying like, hey, we appreciate the passion, it's a very interesting theory, but that's not where our story is going, they would just go like, I don't know, you'll have to see, I can't say anything about that.
There will be, you guys will be satisfied, and
Tyler is just at its peak right now. They're building that up, so definitely ship that.
If you ship Byler?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess we'll see what the Duffer's right.
And you may be thinking, well, they don't want to spoil anything. Exactly. They were treating Byler versus Maleven as something they could spoil, which means they were treating it as a will they, won't they. They were keeping the door open so they could continue to string along queer viewers. If queerbaiting was never their intention, they would have had no problem just point blank saying that Byler was never going to happen, because that wouldn't have even been something they would have considered a spoiler. Do you see what I'm saying? And also, the fact that Noah, this pisses me off so much, the fact that Noah literally had to ask the Duffer Brothers to give Mike and Will a conclusion is insane. Absolutely insane. And again, even if you aren't a Byler, you should agree with that. Will has been in love with Mike for years. They have been best friends since childhood. Will's love for Mike has been a huge cloud looming in the background for multiple seasons. The fact that they weren't even going to give Will any closure on that is absolutely fucking insane, and it's disrespectful, and it's honestly a slap in the face to not only Bylers but to fans of the show in general. And then to write that scene and have Mike go, not friends, best friends. fuck you. Fuck you. The Duffers are incredibly aware of how big of a ship Byler is, and it honestly feels like just yet another moment of trying to get their hopes up just to like tear them down. Like I honestly truly believe that the Duffers resent Byler fans and just wanted to torture them, and that's why they were going to pretend like Mike and Will had no need for a conclusion, and that's why they put that line in there. Because honestly think about that. Think about how cruel that is. If you had a best friend who confessed like, hey man, I've had this huge crush on you for multiple years. I know it's never going to happen, but can we still be friends? Would you go, no, not friends? Best friends? No, you wouldn't, because that's fucking cruel. That's insane to say. And why do I think the Duffers resent Bylers? I think it's because Bylers made them acutely aware of how not thought out and well written this show actually was. A lot of Byler evidence exists in things like camera angles, lighting choices, set design, colors, wardrobe, etc. And a lot of Bylers really believed that the Duffers were like genius 5-head level writers and directors who were quietly building up this relationship through incredibly well thought out and smart choices, but the reality is they weren't. And so I think the Duffers felt called out because Bylers were putting so much stock into small directing and writing choices, thinking it was great writing, when in reality those choices meant nothing. It wasn't genius, it was just coincidence. They weren't that great of writers. They weren't putting that deep of thought into their show. And so I think they felt called out. A big example of this is Mike's love confession to Elle in season 4, where he says he loved her since the moment he saw her. That's not true. That's not fucking true. We know that's not true because we saw them meet. He wanted to send her back to where she came from. He wanted to send her to a fucking insane asylum. Literally all he gave a fuck about was Will. He did not like Elle.
In the morning, she sneaks around my house, goes to the front door, and rings my doorbell. My mom will answer and know exactly what to do. So send her back to Penhurst, wherever she comes from. We'll be totally in the clear.
So that is just blatantly not true. But Bylers were like, that's, you know, he's purposefully trying to be disingenuous because, you know, like it's intentional that what he's saying in this moment isn't true. But it wasn't. It wasn't. The Duffer Brothers are just such bad writers that they fucking wrote that scene, and we're supposed to watch that as if it's genuine and true when we know that's not true. He didn't like Elle. He definitely did not like love her from the moment he first saw her. That's not fucking true. The Duffer Brothers are just bad writers. And so like that's an example of how like people who believed in Byler thought the Duffer Brothers were great writers and thought like all of these plot holes and like shitty writing decisions were actually like 4D chess. No, they're just bad writers. Also, the painting line never getting addressed is crazy. That's crazy. How the fuck are you going to use the Cyrano trope and then never address it? Especially when it was explicitly told to us in interviews that it would be addressed. Like the fact that Finn Wolfhard literally came to them and was like, hey, so Mike sucks. Like he's really stupid and he's also like an awful friend. And they went, don't worry, it'll pay off. Where? Can you see the payoff? No, because it's not fucking there, Dora. All right. The last thing I'll say on the topic of Mike and Will is that at the end of the day, Mike just looks like a homophobic, unaware, idiotic asshole because of the absolute refusal to engage with Mike and Will any deeper. And again, I'm not even talking Byler in that instance. I'm talking in general about them as best friends. They were perfectly willing to just let everything with Mike and Will end without a single conversation post Will coming out and confessing his love to Mike. And that is awful. That's awful writing. That's awful characterization. That's fucking awful. Another issue I had was Vicky just straight up disappearing. Like, you're not only gonna queerbait the fuck out of the Bylers, but then you're also gonna break up the one canon queer couple, and you're not even gonna give them a breakup scene. You're just gonna insert a throwaway line about like controlling partners, as if Vicky was a controlling partner. What are you talking about, Robin? What are you talking about? And that also, the whole thing with Enzo's and their date is just useless. A lot of people were pointing out that whenever a character plans to go to Enzo's, somebody dies and they don't end up getting to go to Enzo's. So as viewers, we're sitting here thinking one of two things happens. Either one of them dies and it's gonna be super tragic and super sad, or they end up being the couple that finally breaks the Enzo's curse and they get to have their happily ever after. But neither of that happens. It's totally irrelevant. Enzo's is completely irrelevant. And that'll be so unsatisfying on rewatches if I ever do rewatch season 5, because that was one of the moments that it felt like there was real emotion and stakes there. The whole like, are they gonna make it to Enzo's? Is one of them gonna die? Are they finally gonna get to go? But like, it doesn't It doesn't fucking matter. None of their fighting the entire season matters. None of it matters. It doesn't matter. And that leads me into the lack of stakes in general. Through volume 1, I genuinely felt tension. I felt the stakes. I was on the edge of my seat. But as volume 2 progressed, it became increasingly clear for a 5th season in a row, the Duffers weren't going to kill off a single meaningful character. And after that, I just didn't care. Like, oh look, they're going to fight Vecna. Doesn't matter because nobody is actually in danger, and so I'm just sitting here waiting for it to be over because there's only one way it can end, and it's with Vecna dying and all of the characters being completely fine. Like, they couldn't even kill off Mr. and Mrs. Wheeler. Not even one of them. Not even Ted. Ted, who, by the way, they also forgot about. Literally the entire time me and my brother were watching the scene in the hospital, we were cracking up because we were like, where the fuck is Ted? Does nobody care about Ted? Like, no one's going to acknowledge that Ted is just like in a hospital bed somewhere, or what are we doing? Elle is literally the only main character they let die, and even then they were so much of pussies that they couldn't commit to it and they left it open-ended. The lack of stakes is actually baffling to me. I have no idea why they thought they needed to keep every single character alive. Like, and it's not even like, oh, I want everyone to die, but it's just like, you're like, no one's even getting remotely like hurt in a meaningful way. Like, Mr. and Mrs. Wheeler got like their throats slashed open, and that Mrs. Wheeler was like walking and talking and like being a deus ex machina a couple days later. Like, no, there's no stakes here. Also, Mike becoming a writer and staying in Hawkins. Okay, so you're just reheating Gordy's nachos from Stand By Me, but significantly worse. I've mentioned before on this channel that Stand By Me is the most important movie of my life. Like, I literally have a tattoo for it, and I just couldn't not notice the parallel between Mike and Gordy in that final scene with Mike. One friend dies, the friend group has all grown up and moved on without one another, but he becomes a writer who writes about the friends he had when he was 12. Sound familiar? Because I just described both fucking plots. The last line of Stand By Me is literally, I never had any friends later on like the ones I had when I was 12. Jesus, does anyone? You cannot tell me that that was not an intentional parallel between Mike and Gordy, especially because the show is known to reference other iconic 80s movies, and it has specifically referenced Stand By Me in the past. Like, it felt very clear to me that Mike's ending was absolutely supposed to evoke the last line of Stand By Me for anyone who's seen Stand By Me. But here's the difference. Gordy's ending is satisfying and devastating and beautiful. I not only didn't care about Mike's ending, but it honestly just confused me. Like, it was a moment of like, oh, yeah, I guess Mike was set up as a storyteller in the beginning, so sure, I guess he might end up being a writer. I guess that makes sense. I guess. You know, but like, the reality is we've come so far and been so separated from Mike the storyteller that it isn't a satisfying or inevitable conclusion like it is with Gordy. It's just kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, he just sits around and writes about his friends from when he was 12. Okay, sure. I'm also going to use Stand By Me to talk about Steve. Now, I don't think this was an intentional parallel between when it came to Steve's ending, yet I couldn't help but think of Vern. Now, Vern, at the end of Stand By Me, also sticks around his hometown, also works a small town low-wage job, he gets married, he ends up having 4 kids, so that's very, very similar to the ending that Steve gets. Obviously, by the time Stranger Things ends, Steve hasn't gotten married or had kids, but I think that's kind of the conclusion we're meant to draw, is that he is going to get those 5 little nuggets that he told Nancy he wants. That's where his story is going to end up. With Vern, that ending feels right. It feels like a commentary on how not everyone is destined to become a big-time writer like Gordy, or a lawyer like Chris, or end up in jail like Teddy. Some people just stick around their small hometown and end up working a low-paying, kind of looked-down-upon job. They settle into the mediocrity that so many Americans are scared of, but it's not mediocrity for them. It is a fulfilling and happy life. They have a big family that they love. Their life is calm and predictable. That small town that always felt so constricting has grown into a place of being comfort and peace. But with Steve, it doesn't feel like that. And I don't know exactly how to articulate why it feels so different, but with Steve, it doesn't feel like he was able to carve out his own slice of fulfillment and happiness in his small town. Just feels like he failed to escape it. It feels like he hasn't progressed, and I think such a simple change to fix that could have been having Steve actually have a girlfriend who he's getting ready to propose to. He has the ring already. He shows all his friends the ring and he's so excited, and he sees his life as this happy, peaceful, quiet life, and he's happy where he's at. But instead, his ending is played for laughs. Like, him being a sex ed teacher is played for laughs. Him still going on dates and not even being close to finding his wife is played for laughs. And even being a baseball coach, which I don't think is necessarily played for laughs entirely, it still feels like, I don't know, like, oh, of course, Steve ends up coaching kids in baseball because he never moved on from his relationship with Dustin, like, haha. Like, I feel like I'm not articulating the baseball thing well, but it doesn't feel like he ended up in a place that is right for him, even though it should, because that does make a lot of sense for Steve to find happiness and fulfillment in. But instead, it just feels like, oh, look at this failure jock who peaked in high school and can't move on. There is no progression or evolution. And I think a lot of the characters got that treatment. A lot of people have pointed out that Nancy and Mike look exactly like their parents, and Nancy has literally verbalized that that is her worst fear. And so why would that be the ending that we give her, that after 5 seasons where she has talked so much about going to college and how that's her big dream, why would she drop out and start looking like Karen Wheeler? Like, that just doesn't make any sense to me. I'm not even going to go into all of the shit that the Duffer Brothers have been saying in interviews postseason. I think they need to stop taking interviews. I think they need to shut the fuck up, because they're making it so much worse for themselves, because it's opening them up to literally be directly questioned, like, hey, what about this plot hole? What about this thing? What about this thing? And they just keep going like, I think it's up to viewers. Well, it happened off screen. Shut the fuck up. Stop speaking. Go into hiding. Go to a retreat. Like, just stop. What are you doing? You're making it so much worse. I've seen a lot of people online saying that this ending is worse than Game of Thrones, and I highly disagree, because I can at least name multiple things that I actually quite enjoyed this season. I thought the scene where Will gets his powers was super cool. I was really excited about that. I thought that there was some amazing camera work, both in the scenes where Holly and Mrs. Wheeler are getting attacked, but also in the scene at the military base where the Demogorgons showed up. I thought those like one shot scenes, I know it probably wasn't actually shot in one shot, but like it's meant to look like it's one shot. I thought those looked great. I thought the CGI was fantastic. I thought the epilogue scene where all of the teen characters are on the rooftops, I mean, they were teens, they're now young adults, and they're meeting up for like one last time, promising each other they'll get together once a month. I thought that was very hard hitting. I thought it evoked a really real feeling of melancholy, which everyone goes through when you grow up and you start parting with your friends and knowing that nothing will ever be the same again. And no matter how much you want or promise that you'll stay in each other's lives, everyone's lives will continue to evolve in ways that don't involve each other. I think that was a really beautiful scene. It made me emotional. Meanwhile, I can't name a single thing. I don't have a single positive thing to say about Game of Thrones season 8, so, spoiler alert, we'll also be getting into that. But first, let's talk about Shameless. Full disclosure, I never actually finished Shameless, but it was because I heard about this ending and I got so goddamn angry about it. Specifically, I heard how Frank died. Frank Gallagher, the biggest cockroach of all cockroaches, of all the drugs he's done, all the drinks he's had, all the times he has just fallen asleep on the side of the road in a Chicago winter. Fucking COVID-19 kills him. Are you kidding me? I think Shameless definitely did need to end with Frank's death, him becoming sober and turning it around and everyone having a happily ever after. It just would not work with the story Shameless tells or the tone it sets, and it would also just be unrealistic. The damage that he has done to his body and mind is just simply too much to ever fully come back from. Like, his liver is done for, his body's done for, even if he gets sober. But COVID? I hate this ending for multiple reasons. Number one, like I said, of all the things Frank has done, COVID should be like the last thing that takes him off this earth. And number two, I really, really hated the trend back in like 2020, 2021 of TV shows incorporating COVID into storylines. unless you're a hospital-based show like Grey's Anatomy, there is simply no reason that COVID should be involved. I watch TV to escape real life, so I don't want to sit on my couch trying to forget about like this worldwide pandemic that is like keeping me inside and like ruining my senior year of high school and my first year of college. Like, I'm trying to escape that stuff, so why the fuck would I want to sit on my couch, turn on my show, and they're also going through a worldwide pandemic that's ruining everything in their life? Like, why the fuck would I want to watch that? It also doesn't match the tone or vibe of the show whatsoever. Like, imagine if COVID had never happened, but like it still happened in the show, right? You're watching a show about a family of down on their luck, struggling Chicagoans, just trying to survive day by day, and then all of a sudden there's a worldwide pandemic that entirely changes the direction of the show. Like, that doesn't make much sense, does it? No. Which brings me to my next point. It dates the show so much. Not only will people watching in the future be able to immediately pinpoint when the final season came out, but it will also be incredibly jarring, because for them, it's not like a relatable, like, oh, we're all going through COVID together. It's just sort of like, wait, what the fuck? Why is this show about people living in poverty all of a sudden about a pandemic? What is happening? So yeah, it's odd. This show is in here because Frank Gallagher dies of fucking COVID. I hate fucking COVID.
I hate fucking Canada.
Speaking of hating fucking Canada, How I Met Your Mother. How I Met Your Mother is pretty much what it sounds like. It is very similar to Friends. It's a sitcom about 5 best friends living in New York City, except it's better. Yeah, and it's basically, the premise is that it's kind of set around an older version of Ted telling his kids how he met their mother. Kids, when you hear the words worst show ending of all time, more than likely one of 2 shows pops into your head: Game of Thrones or How I Met Your Mother, or Dexter. But again, I have never watched Dexter, so I can't speak to that. I love How I Met Your Mother. I can specifically remember where I was the first time I saw an episode of How I Met Your Mother. It was 2009. I was 8 years old, sitting on the couch of my best friend's house. She had neglectful parents, to be quite frank, and so she was allowed to do and watch whatever the fuck she wanted. And she told me she had some episodes recorded of this super funny show that her older brother liked to watch, and so we sat down and we watched it. And from that moment on, I was hooked. I went home and I immediately set my DVR to record How I Met Your Mother, and I just prayed to God that my dad did not notice and cancel my recording and ban me from watching the show that I really probably should not have been watching at that young of an age. And for years, I tuned in every single week, creating theories of who the mother was and going on forums on my family computer to see what other people were saying. I introduced my brother to the show. When Instagram came out, I signed up and put my username as Barney Stinson is awesome. I fucking loved this show. And then the final season comes. This is it. This is the moment when I finally find out who the mother is. Is it someone we know? A background character we've met in passing? Is this really going to be the perfect woman for Ted Mosby? And she was. She was the perfect woman. She was the perfect answer to the 9-year-long question of how Ted met their mother. And then she fucking died and Ted married Robin. Oh my god. I have so much to say about the final season of this show. Oh, I'm like, I can feel my face getting red because I'm getting angry about it. First of all, having this entire season take place over the span of one weekend was a bad choice. Maybe it wouldn't have been if it had come out in the age of 8-episode seasons, but this was cable when seasons were 24 episodes long. 24 episodes over the span of like 2 or 3 days? Just especially jarring when all of the other seasons take place over the span of like 6 months. And we'll come back to the choice of making the season take place on this particular weekend, okay? Issue number 2, having Marshall be isolated from the rest of the gang for pretty much the entire season. Now, I know the reason behind this was because Jason Segel didn't want to be on the show anymore. He actually tried to quit before the final season, and they were like, no, please just stay for one more season. We're ending the show, just stay. And so he agreed, but they wanted to film all of his scenes really, really quickly. So they made the whole plotline that he was separated from the rest of the friends, so that logistically they could film it really quickly. But still, like, it is so odd to have a concluding season in a show where the entire crux of it has been about this friend group, and one of the friends in the final season is just like not with them ever. He's just in a car or on a bus or doing literally anything but being involved in the season. Issue number 3 is that the final few episodes not only make the entire show meaningless, but it makes that very season that we're watching meaningless. Remember a few seconds ago when I said we'd come back to it being on that particular weekend? Okay, well, we're back to it. That weekend is the weekend of Barney and Robin's wedding. Yes, the Robin who I mentioned Ted gets married to in the end. Why the fuck are we spending 24 episodes dedicated to watching Barney and Robin get married, only to then go, yeah, anyway, Barney and Robin got divorced and I married her instead? What was the fucking point? What was the fucking point to the whole show? What was the point to the season? The conclusion of the show is that Ted isn't actually telling them the story of how he met the kid's mother. It's that he's asking them for permission to get remarried. Meaning, the entire show is not about Tracy, it's about Robin.
You made us sit down and listen to the story about how you met Mom. Yet Mom is hardly in the story. No. This is a story about how you're totally in love with Aunt Robin. And you're thinking about asking her out, and you want to know if we're okay with it.
And I guess that makes it make sense as to why Ted chose to start telling his kids how he met their mother by starting the story when he met Robin. But it would have been entirely believable to me if they had said he chose to start the story off with how he met Robin, because meeting Robin, dating her, and ending that relationship is what led him down this path of all his other failed relationships and made him realize what he truly wants in a partner. So by the time he meets Tracy, he knows she is the one. It's believable to me if they say, well, him meeting Robin is the start of the story, because if he never met Robin, then Robin wouldn't have met Barney, and Barney and Robin wouldn't have gotten married, and their wedding is where Ted meets Tracy. Like, there's a bunch of other plausible excuses for why the story started with Robin other than because it ends with Robin. But here was the problem, is that the showrunners recorded the end of Ted's story all the way back in 2005 when they first started making the show, and they did this because they needed the child actors, I guess they were teens, they needed the teen actors to stay the same age to make it believable that this is one big long story that he's telling to his kids. And so back in 2005, they had no idea how long this show would go on or what would happen in between Ted meeting Robin and Ted meeting Tracy. And so they thought at the time that Ted and Robin ending up together would still make sense by the time the show came to an end, but it didn't. After 9 seasons had passed, so much had happened between Robin and Ted and Robin and Barney and Ted that it didn't make any sense why Robin and Ted would end up together. They broke up for a very good reason. They were not compatible. Robin and Barney got married for a very good reason. They were compatible. And Ted had moved on from Robin for good. That is the entire point of the plot line where Ted digs up the bracelet that Robin buried and could never find, and instead of taking credit for himself, he gives the bracelet to Barney to give to Robin. That's the entire point of the scene where Robin confronts Ted about this and says she knows that he is the one that dug it up, not Barney, and questions like, should I have ended up with you instead? Am I making a mistake by marrying Barney? And Ted goes, no, we broke up for a good reason. You belong with Barney. Then when we get to the ending and Ted and Robin end up together, it feels like it is undoing a decade of storytelling. All of the growth that Ted had is null. All of the growth that Robin had is null. All of the growth that Barney had is null. None of it matters. No character arcs matter. Nothing matters. The mother, the very namesake of the show, doesn't fucking matter. So yes, while I personally think there is one more show that takes the cake for the worst ending of all time, this is the ending that hurts me and upsets me personally the most, because it felt like a betrayal and a straight up lie to a show that I dedicated some of the most pivotal years of my development to. For the final show on the list, I know I said that there's no particular order to this list, but this is the show that I think had the worst ending of all time. I'm sure you can guess. It is Game of Thrones. Now, I didn't watch Game of Thrones up until 2024, so I didn't have the emotional impact that many of its longtime cable viewers did. I knew going into the show that it was widely lauded as the worst final season of all time, and yet nothing could have prepared me for how bad the Game of Thrones ending is. I remember finishing season 7 and thinking, It definitely doesn't hold a candle to the rest of the seasons, and there are problems with it, but I'm still sufficiently entertained. So how bad could season 8 really be? Yeah, and then I pressed play on season 8, episode 1, and then I paused the show and went online and had to look up, is the show really dark, or is something wrong with my TV? Nope. Nope, it's the show. The show is that dark. The first episode felt like an omen warning me of how terrible it was going to get. Right from the jump, it is a shit season. The first episode is literally so dark that nobody can see what's going on. The White Walkers are defeated so quickly after 7 seasons of them being this looming threat. Arya teleports and stabs the Night King, and then that's it. I remember thinking, okay, so how do they come back to life? Because that can't be right. That's not it, right? That surely I didn't just hear winter is coming for 7 seasons just for them to get defeated like that, right? No, that was it. Now, some people hate the plotline of Dany turning crazy as a whole. I don't. I actually think there's a lot of signs that Dany was always meant to go crazy, both in the books and the show. Just like her father went crazy, just like her brother Viserys is fucking crazy. And I think it actually could have been a very cool and impactful ending had it been set up well. Instead, with no warning, after 7 seasons of showing her goodness and care for people, she obliterates all of King's Landing because her friend died. Okay. Like, so many other people that she cares about have died. Why is this the thing that she's like, okay, I'm actually all of a sudden going to just like murder literally everyone for no reason? Like, what? I also don't hear many people talking about this, but I find it really hard to believe that Missandei would essentially tell Dany to kill everyone. Like, she has been with Dany from nearly the very beginning. She sees the good that Dany is capable of, and she sees how close Dany is to the Iron Throne. I just don't see a world in which she's about to die and she chooses her last words to be essentially telling Dany to burn everyone alive just because she's like pissed off that she's gonna die. That just doesn't make sense to me in terms of Missandei's character. Also, the plotline of Jon being a Targaryen goes nowhere. There were so many unanswered questions and dropped plots. Like, what was up with the spiral made of body parts? I guess we'll never know. Dany forgot about the Iron Fleet somehow. Okay. Jaime was one of the best characters, only for him to ruin it all by going back to Cersei. I've never cared much for people, innocent or otherwise. Brother, what? You caring for innocent people is your entire character. That's why you're the Kingslayer. That's your whole fucking character. That also completely kills one of my favorite scenes in the whole show, which is when Jaime explains why he is called the Kingslayer to Brienne in the baths. Cersei being killed by a pile of falling rocks is so unimpactful and stupid. Okay. Why would Tyrion suddenly have faith in his sister to like do the right thing or whatever stupid shit it was he says? Like, you know her better than anyone. In what world would she suddenly do the right thing? What are you talking about? There has already been so much said about the ending of Game of Thrones, so I will just leave you with this. In the very end, when Tyrion is, for some reason, being allowed to give some stupid speech about who should be the next king, he says, "And who has a better story than Bran the Broken?" Anyone. Literally fucking anyone. We just watched everyone's story, and Bran has objectively the dumbest and least impactful story of literally anyone. What are you talking about? What are you saying? Oh my god. So, those are the shows that I think have the worst endings of all time. It pains me to talk about these shows because there was so much potential there. These are all shows that at one point or another I really did love, and then something happened, whether that be one of the Duffer brothers getting a divorce, whether that be a Star Wars spin-off being offered to D&D, whether that be many, many things. Something happened in between the start and the end, and it didn't go well. So please like, comment, subscribe. Again, please comment the shows that you would put on your own personal list and why. If you agree, if you disagree, I honestly can't see anyone disagreeing with my picks. Like, these show endings suck objectively. So yeah, you do you. Let me know. Bye.